Kizami comes in little,
Yes.
and apparently the Japanese, it is shredded very finely like human hair.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's even
Kizami?
thinner than human hair, yes.
And the first comment I made to Aaron after I sparked this pipe, I mean, he's in Japan. I'm talking to him on Facebook, on Messenger. And I said, that is the most amazing Virginia I have ever smoked. And I didn't even know it was a Virginia. I went back on Google because he was probably sleeping because of the time difference. And I'm trying to figure out where they got this tobacco from. They've been smoking this stuff since the 1500s, since the Portuguese brought it there.
Yeah, well, and the reason why Quisero pipes are so small, when tobacco was introduced to Japan, it was extremely expensive there. So, like, to smoke a large bowl of tobacco, pretty much nobody could afford it. Even wealthy men couldn't afford it. That's why they designed pipes with extra small bowl, just like 3-4 puffs, and that's it.
Wow.
And apparently the kabukimono, the crazy ones, the street gangs, the samurais, they used to carry elongated pipes that they used as weapons back in feudal Japan.
Oh, no.
Wow.
Oh, so here on the tamper, right? He's got a pick on the end. But on the end, he's got a tamper that fits the bowl, the little tiny bowl here. So I can tamp my Kizami down. My good buddy Aaron Komsia in Japan. I was hoping he'd be here this morning. I wanted to thank him.
This is how you keep Todd occupied. You give him a new toy.
Just send me something.
And next thing you know, he's in a corner for the rest of the afternoon, perfectly content.
I'm supposed to be doing this with a match, by the way. It's terribly rude to do it with a lighter.
Yeah.
I don't have any matches.
Yeah, I'm still finishing my cigar. Today is birthday of one of the greatest cigar makers of our time, Hamlet Paredes. And that's his latest cigar, 2020 by Hamlet. So I'm smoking it to celebrate his birthday.
So we got Mark Ryan today?
Yes, I'm keeping my eye out for him at the moment here, because I don't believe
He's here, David.
Yeah, I'm here. I got on a couple minutes before 2.
He just got
There you
longer
are.
hair, but that's
Okay.
all.
Well, good to see you, Mark.
You too. I was just listening in. I didn't want to interrupt Todd.
Oh, sorry,
Very
man.
well. I
Is this
am,
Mark Ryan, Daughters and Ryan?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm
We
very
are-
familiar with that tobacco and that pipe.
It's
Not that
amazing.
particular pipe. But would you like to hear a little story of my experience with that?
Absolutely.
I bought the Perique factory in 2005. Okay. Shortly after I bought it, I got a call from Chuck Stanion. You know, he used to run P&T magazine. And he goes, Mark, I got an email from Saab Suge in Japan, and he's bringing a couple dozen of his biggest retailers in Asia over, and he's got 10 things he wants to visit in the US. And number 1 on his list is a Perique factory in St. James Parish. So, you know, I paused him and I said, so let's see, I guess I am the last one. You want me to do it? You know, a little party for him or something. So a little tour. And he said, yeah. So I invited them down. They came down in a big bus and it was awesome. I had a lot of people there, all the magazine editors. I had people from the Attorney General's office, the parish president, the sheriff. We had the, I forget what his title was, one of these top priests from St. Michael's Church down there. He came in and blessed the meal. I hosted a crawfish boil, okay? And Saab and I think Hero were there. They were the only 2 that spoke a little English. The others didn't speak any English, but I kept hearing them say the word Elvis. And I asked Saab, what I keep hearing him mention Elvis, what's that about? And he goes, well, you know, Mark, in Japan, we love Elvis Presley. And we're all excited because we're eating crawfish like Elvis did in the movie King Creole. So that kind of tickled me. But as they left to get on the bus, you know, I'd learned in school and when I got my business degree, they're very into gift giving. So when they got on the bus, I gave them all gifts, and he presented me one of those pipes and some of the tobacco. That was my first experience with that. Although I got another one, I was very fortunate. Suge had a 80th anniversary party a few years ago, and I was one of, I think, 5 people from the United States invited, and I got one of those ceremonial pipes at that too. Beautiful. But
Yeah.
it looks just like a Doka pipe. That's what I mentioned before. That's what the military guys came back, you know, from Iran, Iraq, that stuff, Afghanistan. Really strong tobacco. I think it's mostly to get high, honestly. And they smoke it in a little pipe like that. That's my experience
Yeah.
with that pipe and that tobacco.
Yes, I have one old Kisero pipe from late 19th century, and I also have a small Sugi pipe. It's a little bigger than Kisero, but not by much, maybe like 10, 15 puffs with a briar bowl and bamboo shank. Also a beautiful pipe, and I use it for my Kisame tobacco as well.
Well, let me pop in here for just a second to sort of give a welcome to all the people who are watching us over there on YouTube, and also for the guys who are just coming into the meeting today. First of all, welcome everybody. Today's a very special day. As you might remember, last week I said that we didn't have a speaker booked for today, and so we were going to do something else. We were going to do a little 2020 retrospective of some of the. I was going to do some video clips of some of the other speakers we've had, but then David Ruiz came through for us. Been in conversation with our speaker today for a while, knows him personally, and made arrangements for him to be our guest today. And so, David, I really want to say thank you for that. Super awesome. And then I had a chance to speak with our guest speaker on the telephone for a few short minutes, and totally put my foot in my mouth and embarrassed myself because I thought it was a different person that David had been telling me about. So I'm hoping today to redeem myself by making a good experience for our guest speaker. For those of you who don't know, because you've been living in a cave like me, Mark Ryan is the owner, part owner, I guess now, of Daughters and Ryan Tobacco, and also the owner of L.A. Poche. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Mark?
Poche Parikh Tobacco.
So he, and I'm not going to try to tell his story for him, but just in a little bit of, internet search that not too long ago, Parikh might have disappeared from the availability to get the authentic stuff. And Mark stepped in and has preserved it for us. So I gave him the name, which I can't believe nobody else has called you this before. So I might be late to the party, but welcome to Mark Ryan, the Sheik of Perique, who's going to tell us all about his story. So Mark, welcome to our Virtual Pipe Club.
Absolutely. And I'm very passionate about tobacco and Perique. If I go on too long, just let me know. Okay. And as I'm sitting here, I'm going to enjoy a cigar in a little bit, but what I'm enjoying now, I'm really enjoying in my pipe, is some vintage Syrian from Mac Baren, H&H. It's really good. I don't know if you all have had that before, but I'm enjoying it. I know some of the earlier Mac Barons, I used to burn my tongue, but the H&H series I really enjoy.
Yeah,
So,
Mark, I'm huge fan of Perique. I smoked straight Perique, different kinds, and I enjoy even straight Perique. I also was fortunate to acquire some Decade Series Perique, Daughters and Ryan,
nice.
and I used it in one of my limited edition blends. I made a summertime blend for New York Pipe Club for summer picnic 2 years ago, and I used McClelland Virginia, McClelland blended Turkish, Decade Series Perique, and Dark Fight Kentucky. And it aged so well. I just recently opened one bag, which I had from 2 years ago. It's delicious. that decade series Perique is amazing.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, I didn't have many of those when I bought the company. You know, actually, I had one here fairly recently, and Sutliff got it. You know, the original two I sold, one went to Mike, one went to Mike McNeil. You know, and that was when I first released them. The Mike was funny. I don't know how many of y'all know Mike, but when I bought, well, let me backtrack. When I bought the factory in 2005.
Mark,
Yes, sir.
why don't we go back to the beginning?
You want me to get back? All right.
Yeah, like
I'll start from the beginning.
Start
I
from the
just didn't
beginning.
want to go too long.
No,
But I'll do a good
listen,
summary.
We got if we do the Chris Morgan format, we got 4 hours. So
I won't be that long. All right. Well, let me tell you how I got into the business. Okay. I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and was a finance manager for a huge company, 2 million in sales a day. They were burning me out. I mean, killing me all the hours and everything and all the pressure. And I was on the board of directors of the Richmond Wine Society. So I was really enjoying it. My wife at the time, my ex now, is a physician, and she was being recruited at the hospital here in Smithfield, North Carolina. And I came down, there was nothing in Smithfield back then. I mean, 91, literally almost 70% of the adults didn't have a high school diploma. So there was nothing for me. I was looking for a job in the Research Triangle Park, and I went to the winery that was in town. And I said, yeah, I'm looking for a job, and did some interviews, and they hired me. Little did I know they were bankrupt and had been for a while, but they were so desperate for my wife, because when I brought my wife in, it basically saved the hospital because they didn't have any physicians. So there I am in Johnson County with all these degrees and this education and background. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? You know, well, I looked around, I figured we got sweet potatoes and tobacco. All right. And I think it was President Clinton then, I forget, hit the table and goes, I'm going to make cigarettes $40 a carton. And I figured, you know what? People will start doing roll your own again. So in 91, I went to Whiteville, Virginia. That's where Top Tobacco, Top International had a tinning line for roll your own. And I looked at it, and the cans are going by so fast I couldn't read the labels, you know? And I asked the guy, man, how many hours a day you run this? He goes, I run it 8 hours a shift, 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week. And I was astonished. This was in 91. I was like, for roll your own? And he goes, yeah, man, we're big. Well, I left that figuring if I can capture 1% of their market, I can make a living. Okay. So I borrowed $5,000, bought a computer and a display ad in the National Enquirer. And that's how I launched my company, believe it or not. And I built it up. We doubled in size every year. And then, you know, the big thing was the master settlement agreement. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. That's where the states embezzle $9 billion a year from the tobacco companies every year. They don't do what they're supposed to do. You know, originally when we got into that, their deal was we're going to provide health care for the elderly, particularly those that smoked, and smoking cessation education for the children. And by the way, if you don't join, we're going to sue you into oblivion and you're going to lose everything you've ever accumulated in your adult lifetime. That was basically the letter I got. Okay. So I joined that stupid MSA right after it got going in 98. Actually, I joined in 2000. You're not going to believe this. Okay. Because I threatened to go to court over this. The master settlement agreement went into effect November of 98. Okay. Neither pipe tobacco or roll your own were regulated by the federal government until January of 2000. That was when I paid my first federal excise tax. So they passed a law in 98 imposing stuff on me and others like me, but they had no database of manufacturers because we weren't legitimately recognized by the federal government yet as a manufacturer. I couldn't have contacted the attorney generals to list my, you know, my brands or anything. So the whole thing was something by the big cigarette guys to screw roll your own and pipe tobacco. Pipe tobacco is just getting screwed because they're really consequences that aren't expected for pipe tobacco. Pipe tobacco, I hate to say it, man, of the 7 categories that are regulated by the FDA, when I got involved, they're the bastard son getting the worst abuse, I think. I mean, look at what we're going through. So anyway, I joined that. I was very fortunate. I was the only roll your own company that really did it. Republic and Santa Fe and Peter Stokkeby had other products that got them in. So I did that. Lost 100% of my commercial sales when I joined because the government didn't enforce it, and all the other roll your own guys became non-participating manufacturers. Plus probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 dozen companies formed just to circumvent the government tax MSA. Okay. So I did that. And then really around 2003, 2004, I started getting into pipe tobacco and started smoking and started going to the pipe shows. All right. And bought the Perique factory in 2005. All right. And before I go back to that, let me finish this trail of the stories. Okay. So we had a series of laws that went into effect under the first Obama administration, all within the first month, I believe. And, you know, I'm doing okay. I'm on my feet. But when I tell this, it's going to freak you out because people have no clue what we went through in the government. Okay. One of the first things that went through was called the Pact Act. Okay. And with the Pact Act, it meant it was an extension of the Jenkins Act, which was, I think, from around 1950, where you couldn't sell cigarettes to the mail. Well, that included roll your own. Okay. And we all thought it was going to do pipe tobacco, man. That would have been the end of pipe tobacco in terms of availability. Because unlike cigarettes that are ubiquitous, we rely on mail order for pipe tobacco. You know what I'm saying? So they made that illegal. So at that time, I had the first webpage in the world for roll your own in the mid 90s, cigarettetobacco.com. In that era, the URL was worth millions. Okay. They changed all the internet stuff. It became worth 0. Okay. I had to close the store, and that's a good source of income for 6 people. I mean, you can imagine what that did in a year in terms of revenue. So we had to shut that down. All right. Well, then this is the killer that really hurt pipe tobacco. And I know it drove Paul crazy. I don't know if any of you went to those UPCA meetings in Chicago, but during that era, the S-chip was where they increased the tax on roll your own and pipe. Okay. They increased the tax on roll your own. And this went into effect April 15th, 2009. Okay. From roll your own, it went from 1.0969 to $24.78 per pound. Okay. Pipe tobacco went from 1.0969 to 2.8311, so roughly $3. From $1 to $3 for pipe, roughly, and $1 to $25 for roll your own. All right. Well, I was in the master settlement agreement. I was already paying $6 a pound for that. Okay. Now imagine that. I'm in business, my own company. I started with nothing. All right. I'm lucky if I earn $1 on a pound because roll your own is volume. It's not like I price it like the pipe guys and make a ton of money. Okay. And giving the government $31 a pound, I wanted to be on government payroll. I never owned my own business. I was a collection agency for the friggin' government. Okay. So what do you do? All right. Well, being the master settlement agreement is not an easy thing, man. I went to all those meetings every year. I got to know the attorney generals. They attack you constantly. Sometimes I'd be afraid to get to my PO box to see what they were indicting me for next. So the thing that saved me, okay, because I changed the pipe tobacco by a TTB classification. That's the key. That's the tax basis. On January 1st, 2009. Nobody else changed before April 15th. And the reason being, I'm also the only company that went to the TTB, or actually the ATF back then. They used to have these trade shows on how to do stuff correctly. They had one in 06, 07, and 08. I went to all 3. At the one in 08, I said, look, I've had enough, man. I've had a heart attack. These attorney generals are driving me insane, trying to protect and defend the whole friggin' industry because nobody stands up. I'm going to change the pipe tobacco. And you can't do anything about it because I got your TTB definition right in front of me that's identical. There's no difference between roll your own and pipe tobacco. And if there's an issue, I'll get a 50-cent corncob pipe out of China and throw it in the bag. There's nothing you can do about it. And I don't have to deal with the MSA anymore. Okay. Thank God I had that in writing. Okay. And I had that paper trail from 08 because I told them at the end of the year, starting January 1st, I'm going to be pipe tobacco. I'm going to walk away from roll your own. Okay. Well, you can imagine the, you know what, hit the fan when the attorney generals heard that, right? So they called me up. And the interesting thing was, I don't know if you all know this. Okay. Republic Tobacco, which is the giant in roll your own in the room. Okay. They were 40.8% of the roll your own market, number one. Back in that era, Bugler was 28.8%. They spent like 35 million to circumvent the taxes by doing this thing called expanded tobacco, which is big in like cigarettes. And it doubles the size. It puffs it up like popcorn. Plus it puts a little twist on it so it fills the bag more fully. So half a pound now fills 1 pound bag. So if you want to make a cigarette, instead of having a gram in it, it's got a half a gram. Okay. Well, everybody else went with a thicker cut. Actually, I was the only one that went with a pipe cup initially. I went 12 cuts an inch. Everybody else went like 20 cuts an inch. All right. So we circumvented the $25. We went to $3. Okay. Well, since I was in the MSA, who did they call? The attorney generals. So I get a call from National Association of Attorney General, the 3 of them and like 6 attorney generals on the phone. And they grill me for 2.5 hours, want to know what I'm up to. And I did the same thing. I said, look, $31 a pound. Are you insane? When I joined the master settlement agreement and was paying $5 more, I lost 100% of my commercial accounts. These NPMs, they're going to be selling pipe tobacco at $7 a pound. How do you expect me to sell roll your own at 50? I mean, I still have, 20 people I've got employed. And thank God I knew one of the attorney generals that was on the line. And she said, you show me that paper trail where you started that a year ago, and I'll get off your case. Otherwise, we're going to crucify you. And I said, within 5 minutes, I'll send you the paper trail. So that's what happened. A lot of y'all don't realize what was going on, why people did that. And Paul Creasy freaked. I don't know if you knew Paul. He used to run Sutliff before Phil Green went in there. And now we got Jeremy and Jonathan. But he freaked because he was looking at tax parity around the corner. I don't know if y'all remember that. He was like, oh, you guys screwed the pooch. Now pipe tobacco is going to be screwed because we're legitimately 4 million pounds. And now we're showing the TTB 30 million pounds. The other 26 is hookah and roll your own or whatever. Obviously the government's not going to like that. They're going to go to parity. Okay. I don't know. That was a big issue. I read some stuff on that. Paul did. Are you all familiar with the issue with that? Maybe not.
I don't know that everybody is. There's a few people who've been following this from that top-down view, but I think most of us are just,
See, that's the ultimate thing where we could be screwed for pipe tobacco, is if they say it should have been the same as roll your own anyway. All right. The problem is you can't really define it where you can differentiate it. That was Paul's gig because Paul defined it in a way that basically fit the Sutliff stuff, but none of Mike McNeil's, none of Mike Gold's, all this other. It's like, man, you're throwing all the friends under the bus, protect your stuff. And I hate to tell you, and I won't go into the definitions he had, but the definition that set his up as pipe tobacco, I said, okay, that'll work for a month because I can guarantee you I can circumvent that immediately. And all these NPMs that do everything in the gray, they'll do it too. I mean, I'll put it in the refrigerator, for 15 minutes. I'll drop the moisture. I'll hit it in a blender. I'll do it. And then I'll roll a cigarette with it, a stick. you're going to circumvent it, and then we're all going to pay anyway, and you're going to throw everybody under the bus. Fortunately, that never came to reality, but down the road, that's something for pipe tobacco need to worry about.
So Mark, I'm trying to follow the thread here. Is roll your own even a thing anymore? Number one.
It is marginally, there is some, and I don't really keep up with it due to the volumes. So that's the thing with S-chip. All right, where the taxes went up and the impact on me. Okay. Then he signs this friggin' FDA bill. Okay. It had been vetoed twice by the prior president. Doesn't even read it to see that the friggin' date's in there from 07. They don't even read it. You know, and I swear to God, when that bill first came out, I carried it to all the trade shows. We laughed about it. I was like, have you read this thing? Some idiot communist wrote it. There's no way an American wrote it. I mean, if you read the FDA bill, thank God they don't enforce it completely. Because in the FDA bill, there's no branding of any kind. Everything is on a white label, and it says pipe tobacco, or it says cigarette, or roll your own. You won't be able to tell C&D from Sutliff or anything. Okay. I'll tell you another thing they have in here. This one really got me. Okay. This is in the FDA bill. I'm serious. That now I have, I don't know, maybe 30 registered trademarks with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. They have a clause in that friggin' bill that if a non-tobacco company comes out with the same name, let's say Winsale, they come out with Winsale brownies. Within 24 hours, they can knock on my door and say, Mr. Ryan, you can never again use the trademark Winsale because a non-tobacco company wants to use it. So we've usurped authority for to use any of your trademarks. That's in that friggin' bill, man. I looked at it, we take it around, we were all laughing like crazy. There's no way. So it got vetoed twice. I'll be damned if Obama signed it without reading the damn thing. Okay.
I got a question.
What happened was,
The,
here's what happened.
I
With
got a
that,
question.
here's why the date was a killer. Okay. What that meant was, and this is where people didn't get it. You know, they kept saying it had to be on or before April 15th, 2007. That's not what it says. It has to be on that day, not on or before. So if you had a Christmas series and you did them in December and January, you didn't have them for sale April 15th, can't be on the market. Okay. So you look at the cigar guys, if they enforce that, you're talking 100,000 facings that had to be pulled off the market. Look at pipe tobacco, how many would be pulled off the market? Okay. Pipe tobacco, we're on a thin edge here, the way they're regulating. Okay. Because not only that, they're against all flavorings. Imagine if they enforce that with pipe tobacco. We're dead meat. That
David,
FDA bill is going to hurt a lot of people. Now, where it killed me, I was king of roll your own in 07, right?
Mark, can
But in
you?
09, I changed to pipe tobacco. So what
Yeah,
that
David,
meant was,
Mark,
I've been in
Mark,
business. Let me finish this.
yeah, let's finish that. Then I want to let David
I
jump
was in
there with
business
something.
for 30 years, had legal products, but I had 600 SKUs I had to remove. Not a single tobacco product that I now have was available in 07. So to finish that thread, what I did, I had a friend that was willing to spend $1, $2, God knows how many millions of dollars to keep my pipe tobacco, my 29 original ones, on the market as pipe tobacco. Okay. I would, at my age, plus they originally saying it was going to be millions of dollars. What you have to do to keep it on the market, you have to do what's called a substantial equivalence report to the FDA. And it says that it's equivalent or identical to what was on the market on 07. Okay. I wasn't going to do it. Okay. Well, the company that bought a share of my company, they did it. I sent in 3 packages to the FDA. Each package was 2 full cases of copy paper. That's 5,000 plus 5,000. That's 10,000 times 3. Their lawyer sent me 30,000 pages of paper that I had to go through and sign just to keep those stupid blends on the market. And that's not guaranteed because they still want lab testing on every blend. If you can believe that. The FDA is screwed up, man. And if they go after pipe tobacco hard, we're in trouble. And I know some things going on with the industry in general, but let David, I didn't mean to. Hey, at my age, David, I didn't mean to stop you, but I'll forget what I was saying in a heartbeat.
You want to make sure it gets out there, so in case you run out of time later. I get it.
Go ahead.
David, go
I got
ahead.
a suggestion or a question. It's like, let's say the Ramback. Can you register that as another product, tobacco related? So then, since it's yours, you can keep calling your tobacco Ramback.
Yeah, he's going to keep those brands. That's one of the original 29. And we have still some inventory in stock here that we manufactured in-house. I think we have some Ramback left, some of the Rainbow Shaves. But the guy that bought my company, or that really bought a share of mine, he has no clue how lucky he is. Because when I started my company, I was so lucky. I was working with a leaf guy in Kentucky, Vaughn Tobacco, they're gone. And Kentucky Cut Rag is gone. They were the preeminent leaf guys in that era, in the 90s and early 2000s. And they basically went out of business. Well, when I developed my blends, I would go visit them and stay for a while. And we'd put out the leaf, we'd put out cut leaf, and we'd play back and forth, and I'd come up with a blend, and it was my formula. Okay. Every other roll your own company, a leaf guy would come to their building and say, here's what we got off the shelf. You can call it XYZ. Okay. The main leaf company that supplies everybody, I'm the only customer that they have, and God knows how many they had at one time, probably hundreds. They had a formula designed by me. Everybody else, they're probably 5 or 6 roll your own blends, and every other company has one of those. So when I worked the deal with this company, you know, he's bought it basically in case things really go to hell and he needs to go back to roll your own. Mine are grandfathered in because I was around then.
So this takes us up to 2005. Is that about right?
That's basically through where I am now. Actually, it's that 2020 with DNR Tobacco. So we're no longer manufacturing here in Kenley. The person that bought my company, holding company, they'll be manufacturing. They're not going to keep all 29 going. I can tell you that, because you know, these big companies, they don't do small stuff. You know, if somebody calls me and they're like, "Hey man, can you do this?" I mean, back in the era when we could do some new stuff, you know, I might do a blend for 50 pounds. Well, if you've got a big company, if they're not doing thousands of pounds, you know, every month or two, they're not going to do it. You know what I mean? So the industry is changing, man. The tobacco weenies like me are a thing of the past. I hate to say it.
When you first bought the company that became Daughters and Ryan, you know, with Roll Your Own, were you a big tobacco lover? Did you smoke pipes?
No, I didn't like tobacco at all. Yeah, I started it from scratch. Yeah, when I started in '92, I wasn't a tobacco guy at all. It's just I had nothing to do, and it's like we got tobacco and sweet potatoes. I don't want to sell sweet potatoes, and I'm unemployed.
So,
you know,
did it grow on you then? Did it like?
No, what really helped me, you know, I sidestepped by saying I was on the board of directors of the Richmond Wine Society for 8 years. That developed my palate like nobody's business. So when I got into tobacco, man, I was different than most people right off the bat. And it just gave me a sense to blend that I think a lot of people didn't have, and that's how I got into it. But it was a matter of, what am I going to do? Am I going to commute an hour and a half to Research Triangle Park? I've got 2 little kids, and I figured I'm going to start a tobacco company, and if they go after that, I'll sell leaf. If they go after that, I'll sell seeds. And at the time, I had 2 little children. One was an infant, one was a toddler. And I put my children first in everything, including the name of my company. That's why it's Daughters and Ryan. My children come first.
I kind of figured that. I did. That's awesome, by the way. Well, I'm curious about, and by the way, I'm also following along with some of the comments that are happening over here on the YouTube group. We got about 40 or 50 people, 50 plus watching over on YouTube as well. And I'm curious about like where your love of tobacco at the moment. Like, so you've come from a guy who didn't really even like tobacco, got into the board of a winery or a wine group.
Back when I lived in Richmond before I moved to North Carolina. Yeah.
And then suddenly you find yourself the owner of a tobacco company. But at some point in time, like, you must have said, I like this. This is good. I'm actually going to smoke this.
I got into it. And, it's funny because during that era, all American tobacco was flavored. Okay. And when you would buy tobacco, it was an American blend. Okay. You could get an English blend back then. This is different. This is, when you're dealing with leaf guys, not pipe nomenclature. English blend was basically, Virginia with some Oriental and an organic casing. And I came in, I was like, well, I want to do like that American blend, but I don't want all the chemical crap in it. And what are you going to call it? Well, I guess I'll call it US blend. I was the first one to coin the term US blend. Okay, in the early 90s. And that's not anything for pipe guys, but it was a new thing in rolling around. I was the first one to put tobacco in a baggie. Everything back then looked like an oil can, but I couldn't spend the money to do that. And that's it. I got into the leaf and I started going to some of the leaf events, and I got into it. I never got into growing it, but I'm surrounded by all these people that grew it and grew up with it. And I just got passionate about it. And when I joined the master settlement agreement, when I was paying that extra money, I figured, I got to differentiate, because if I'm paying more and you got all these people illegally selling stuff, if I don't do the very best I can possibly buy and create blends nobody can make, I'm not going to survive. So I started studying the different blends. I got in with people. I went to, Germany. I went to England. I went to Barcelona. I went to all these events and just connected with the people where I had access to anything I wanted. And, when you're into it and you start envisioning stuff, it's almost like you can envision a matrix in your head where these would go good. And, maybe I can go down this line and create something. And you just create a portfolio based on that. And that's what I did. In that era, everybody else had full flavor like menthol. I had 31 blends. And I really had 3 organic blends, on the books, which I never got out because one of my suppliers bailed on me. But it was a totally different era back then.
And did you have a palette for or a penchant? I'm going to have to use the French here because we're going to get into Creole. Did you like Perique before you decided to buy the company, or how did that come about?
Yeah, I lucked out. I really lucked out. I was up in Tennessee visiting. There's a company out there that's called RC Owen, Mr. Owen. I don't know if they're still open. I think they probably are. It was in Gallatin. And I was acquiring some dark fired and some dark air cured. And they're the ones that I'm not sure if they still do. I don't keep up with them anymore, but they were the ones that created the market for those 2 categories, mostly for chewing tobacco and snuff and stuff like that. And I could get some gorgeous tobacco back then. Just cherry pick. When you go to a warehouse that's under 1,000 square feet and you're picking out the bales, you get the best stuff. Okay. And I mentioned, that was, golly, probably close to 20 years ago. And I was up in one of the offices and I was saying, I've got so many interesting blends, but well, I tell you, if I could get some Perique, man, I'd do a Perique roll your own. Nobody's done that yet. Okay. And this was right before American Spirit did the Perique cigarette. Okay. And I said, but I've looked into it. You can't get any, man. There's just nothing left. What a little bit's produced, it's already pre-sold. And one of the guys there, he goes, well, we're the ones that sell Mr. Pochet, the air cured for the blend. Because back then, you got to imagine. Okay, let me back up for 1 minute too, because I want you guys to freak on the blend. Okay, Perique for the first half of the last century, they probably did 200-300 barrels, 400 barrels a year. I don't know. It was several hundred barrels. Okay. Well, the advent of World War II, people stopped smoking pipes. They stopped smoking cigars so much. The demand for Perique collapsed. Okay. In the 1900s, there were three main manufacturers of Perique. Okay. The biggest was Mr. Roussel. And then you had Mr. Guglielmo, and then you had Mr. Pochet. The Roussels were the biggest. Prior to what he did in 1905, they used to put Perique in these tiny little boxes and press it. It held like 18 to 20 pounds. Mr. Roussel industrialized it in 1905 by putting it into oak whiskey barrels. Okay. Well, in case you haven't heard, or you may not know, tobacco's tough, man. And in Louisiana, you get hurricanes, you get hail, you get drought. So you're lucky if maybe 2 out of 3 years you get a crop that's any good. Okay. Well, Mr. Roussel figured this out because he was selling hundreds of barrels a year during that time. Well, if you get a year where a hurricane comes in and knocks down every plant, what are you going to do? You're going to tell all these customers you can't do it? So what he did was he would hold some St. James grown Perique in the back, and he'd buy Perique tobacco on the secondary market to blend. And what he did, because I've heard this from people in the family, he tested different types of tobaccos, and he found that air cured, when he processed it, he could do it in a blend. He just never told anybody. Okay. And in a bad year, that's how he would make it up. And then Guglielmo and Pochet did that too. Okay. Well, when the market crashed, Roussel was like, I'm out. We're not selling any tobacco. So he closed somewhere around 1950. Okay. And then Guglielmo, he stayed in business until around 78 or 80. And he was blending and not doing very good blends. I hate to say it. Because he was trying to use Honduran tobacco to save a penny for the stupid blend. And he ruined it, I think, from what I heard. But he had other personal issues. So he went out around 70 or 80. Since 1980, Mr. Pochet was the only one selling Perique. Okay. And I don't know how much was grown by the farmers back then, but I know when I bought it in 05, there was 3 acres being grown. Okay. Now he was still selling Perique. Okay. But there wasn't enough grown to sell straight St. James. So if it hadn't been for Mr. Pochet, because people say, oh, he's selling that fake shit. It's the only thing you've ever smoked for 100 years. You just didn't know it. Okay. But I guarantee you, since 1980, it had to have been a straight blend except for a rare year because none of the farmers were growing it then. You know, they were making nothing. And the children, for those of you who don't know, man, tobacco is so hard work and it's so labor intensive. You know, all the kids are like, you think I'm going to work out in that heat? You out of your friggin' mind. I'm going to get a degree and get a job. Well, what a lot of them did, screw that. I'm going to go to war. I'm going to go in Vietnam. Some of them went to war to get out of the friggin' tobacco crops. Okay. So really, once I got in there, I mean, I've got all these farmers growing. It's really in the last few years, I've been able to sell some straight St. James. I don't know how long that's going to last because there's just not enough grown, man. It's so labor intensive.
I want to ask her.
And it costs so much more. It's 50% more than the blend because the damn farmers now, because they want so much money for it. I'm paying the farmers, believe it or not, okay, 50% more than when I started. And I mean raw leaf. Raw leaf, they bring it in. I got to strip every leaf by every stem. I got to tie them in bundles. I got to put them in the barrel. Got to put them under pressure. I got to take it out 3 times, do all this other mess. They bring the raw leaf to me. I paid 50% more than when I was buying Perique as a manufacturer than I bought it for finished in the barrel delivered to my building. So the cost of Perique, if I were to charge correctly, I couldn't sell the damn stuff because the St. James guys are getting 3 or 4 times what the tobacco's worth on the market. They wouldn't grow it. I'm paying the farmer down there at least 3 times what the value is on the market because nobody wants to grow, man. It's so labor intensive. So I saved Perique, you know, everybody tells me that, but it's a tough ride, man. I mean, I've stabilized. We now have a factory. Keep in mind, when I got it, there was nothing. Okay, now Percy, everybody thinks, oh, Percy. I won't get into Percy because they've had so many issues, but they don't do Perique in the traditional way. They cut about a ½ inch off the end of the stem, and that's it, man. It doesn't even get turned. It doesn't get processed the same way.
So
It all
Park,
goes to a cigarette. It
I
all
want
goes
to
to a
hop in
cigarette.
with a question real quick, and
Yeah.
then get you back to your story. Like, because a couple of people have asked about what's so special about St. James Perique as opposed to others, and just on the basis of what you just said, I'm curious now: is it the tobacco itself? Is it the terroir, or is it the way it's made?
You know, it's everything, because Perique itself is also used as a term for processing. There is,
But
and I
St.
hate to be
James, what makes
disrespectful,
St.
let me
James?
call
so
it,
special?
let me say imitation. Okay, there's an imitation Perique actually that's made in Brazil. Okay, I know the people that do it. It's a big company. Can't compare to what we do. Okay, to me, it's immoral or unethical, let's say, to use the term Perique if it doesn't have friggin' Perique grown in St. James Parish in the barrel. They have no business calling it Perique. Because if you'll notice, hey, everybody was getting the blend for 40 years. I'm the dumbass that said, oh yeah, it's a blend. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah, nobody's growing it. If it weren't for a blend, you wouldn't have any. Okay. Now, the thing with the blend, let me mention this. Okay. Because if you think about it, there are a couple ways you can do it. But because of the timing of when the tobacco comes in, we develop them in barrels separately. If you think of it like a grape meritage, we do it like a California model where you blend, where you do the Cabernet separate from the Merlot, and then you blend them to get the finished superior product. Whereas in Bordeaux, they throw the Merlot and Bordeaux grapes together and say these crops come in at different times. And you know, I was concerned about that. I mean, what's going on? Let me see what's happening. Well, when I first got in, I started testing the barrels at different cycles. Okay, when I put them in, and it's very interesting. The St. James, straight St. James, from one of the 4 or 5 farmers I deal with all the time. When it ferment, and by the way, let me tell you how we do it. We strip every leaf, we tie it into a bundle, and we put it into a barrel in a certain way. And then we use a railroad jack with one of these handles, squishes it down, ferments in its own juices. Once we get the barrel fairly full, takes several charges, and it's stable, we take the railroad jack off and we put a screw jack because that can maintain the pressure. Okay. For the first, I don't know, 5 to 8 months, it just depends on the cycle of the plant. It's actually fermenting. Okay, you'll actually see some bubbling and some foam and stuff. And as you turn it, as you first squeeze it, it's kind of looks like dirty water. Okay, and as the cycle goes on, because it's 12 to 18 months, as you turn it, it goes from like that dirty water or a dark tea to like a dirty oil almost. And then with the final turn, and you're taking out the excess too. So you got excess water in there, it can, you know, sour. It's a real pain to get this right. And then by the time you're done, it's all either evaporated or absorbed in, or it's been removed. Okay, but it's the fermentation that's the key. But the flavor evolves constantly. Okay, so what I started doing, I do it at 3 months. Okay, and I'm like, okay, totally different. St. James, it's getting like an immature fruit to start, kind of like a grape fermentation, but it hadn't changed color. Whereas the air cured, and I get the best air cured I can, whether it's Kentucky, Tennessee, or Canada. He used to call it Green River Acadian. Well, when I bought the company, I realized it's the same leaf. And Green River is just this one group of farms on the Green River in Tennessee. And you don't use Green River every time, because if you can't get it, you get it, you know, in an adjacent field. It's not called Green River. So I called it Acadian because I thought it was dishonest to call it Green River, because some of the people remember it being called that. So anyway, the air cured, non-St. James, I'll just call it air cured. It's getting darker sooner, and it's getting some of those earthy notes, but the fruity notes haven't come in yet. Okay. Then you go into 6 months, and you're starting to get some fruity notes in the air cured. It's getting darker, okay? But it's still trying to find where it's at, okay? Same with the St. James at 6 months. It's darkening a little bit, and it hadn't developed the earthy notes, and the fruit is starting to change more from like a green grape into like a plum fermentation. You know what I mean? Because that's what really you're going for. Okay, so then from 9 to 12 months, it's stabilizing those flavors, and it's starting to get the earth notes and some of the other things because they're both way out of balance. Okay, and then the last 6 months is when, because the leaves are so much hardier. Now think about it. I'm buying every leaf from those damn farmers down there. Some of those leaves suck. I'm cherry picking 50, 70, 90,000 pounds out of a 50 million pound market. The leaf that goes into the blend is superior. It's better body, it's thicker, it's more consistent. Those guys, they went to the blend because they had to for bad years. But the main reason Mr. Roussel started it was you had to have consistent availability every year. And when you have the blend, you have consistency and you have availability and you have good quality every year.
So
Okay?
Mark, you said when you took over the company Pouchet that
Yeah.
there was like, did you say 3 acres was all that you were
There were,
cultivating?
yeah, well, I was buying from, actually, when I got it, you're not going to believe this. I mean, it was dead. When I bought it, literally Perique was dead. Okay. Because when I bought it in 05, Mr. Pouchet didn't contract with farmers to grow any locally in 05, and he didn't buy on the secondary market from the air cured. So when I bought it, it was a dead company. The only Perique that would have been processed would have been Percy's with a stem in, and 100% goes to American Spirit cigarettes, and you wouldn't want his anyway. It's got the damn stem and it's got tons of issues, right? So I'm buying it. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? Right? So that was why we started paying the farmers more to grow. They weren't going to grow. And the other thing that I did, this will blow your mind. When I bought the factory, the business model was the farmers would bring out. So when I bought it, let me before I step ahead. Yeah, when I bought it, the only real farmer was Dudley LeBlanc and Paulina, and 2 of his cousins, Boo Boy and Droopy, grew maybe an acre on a side lot on his land. That was the 3 acres. That was it. That was it. Okay, period. I mean, I got 150 acres being grown now by the guys I'm promoting, right? I mean, it's totally different. All right.
What kind of production do you get off of 150 acres?
Well, I don't get all of it because I'm working with Percy too, but I got the farmers going. I mean, I think it's healthy to have 2, and everything's so political, man. You got to be nice to everybody, even when they're trying to backstab you and screw you. You know, it's just one of those things. So the farmers, they're in the middle, and they love me because I saved Parikh for them, right? And I promoted it, which built American Spirit sales like crazy too, I would suspect. But they sell to Percy too. I mean, they're friends as well, but they do it differently. But when I bought the business in 05, the farmers would bring the barrels to the manufacturer. It had already been turned twice, but it still had the string on it. And then the manufacturers would open it, cut the string, make the blend. I say manufacturers, Mr. Pouchet, and probably to some extent. Well, I know Percy did the same thing. And you blend it, and that's when you make the 3rd turn, and you blend it and put it back under, and then you cap it, and you put 500 pounds in the barrel.
Mark, I have a question about the integrity of, you mentioned earlier about the integrity of Perique, per se, you know, the blend, you know, the tobacco and the process. In the UK and on the continent, we have protected product status for things like Scotch whisky, Melton Mowbray pies, which are pork pies, but can only be called Melton Mowbray pies if they're produced in Melton Mowbray. Everybody else in the country just has to call them pork pies. Is there a similar system in the States?
Well, you know, I looked into that because I wanted to do something like they do with Vidalia onions. And I couldn't quite pull it off, but one thing that we did do is and I worked with one of the farmers. We met with the Louisiana State Legislature, and they designated St. James Parish the Perique capital of the world. And basically, I don't think anybody in their right mind would try and make that, because it's such a pain and you really got to know what you're doing. I mean, the biggest company in the world is doing it in Brazil, and they can't quite get it. You see, the thing is, to me, it's when I bought the property, I bought a living factory. And I don't mean just living in the term that it's a cultural and history and tradition that's living. They're living microorganisms in there, just like in France, when you go to the wineries, they got a wall that's black with all kinds of mold and stuff. You don't clean that wall because that's what's giving the grapes its great flavor. There's stuff in the air down there, you know, and I think that that's part of what makes it unique. It's the soil too. They've got this special magnolia soil, you know, it's underground. I mean, when the water's up on the levee, I can go in the field and literally take a shovel and cut a hole and come back in a few minutes, and it's half filled with water from the hydrostatic pressure on the other side of the levee.
Yeah. You mentioned geography there. A lot of the protected products in the UK are, you know, they have a geographical element to it, you know, like your Melton Mowbray pies, your Scotch whiskey, your Shetland wool, and so on. So it's a geographical recognition that stuff, whatever it is, doesn't have to be food products.
That's the ticket. And I tried to do that. I can't remember why it didn't go through any better, but I did try and do that. We settled with the legislative thing.
Mark, let's pause here for a second. I got so many more questions, and our story's half done, but I want to open it up to the guys in the group here for questions. Like, Phil, I'm glad you popped in. For those of you who don't know, might be new to the group here, it's always okay to just turn your mic on and start asking questions. I turn the mics off because it doesn't interfere with the speaker and pop the screen back and forth and whatnot. But that doesn't mean that you can't talk, right? So, but I want to pause right now. If you got some questions, there's a couple of people with questions over there on YouTube I'm going to pop in with, but
I put my mic on because I had a question.
Yeah. Go for it.
So on the business end of it, I'm out in California, don't know anything about the industry, don't know anything. I just love the pipe tobacco. I've got a pound of AP Rinpoche that I paid $27 for. I bought this, 10 months ago. And my question is, on the demand side, I mean, I've had this for almost a year and it's still full to the brim. And this will probably last me, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years. How do you guys survive on that? First of all, how do you produce a pound of this for $27?
Well, here's the thing, okay? And I love all my friends in the industry, both roll your own and pipe, okay? This is one thing that's led to our problems too, okay? Roll your own traditionally is high volume, low margin, okay? Pipe tobacco, traditional pipe tobacco, low volume, huge margins, okay? Well, when I transitioned, and I'll just use some raw numbers, these aren't totally accurate, but if I'm selling a pound of tobacco to the roll your own guy for $10, okay, how can I sell a 50 gram 10 to a pipe guy for $10? You know what I mean? So a lot of times I'd go to shows and people are like, man, your tobacco is so cheap. It's like, I can't do the margins because of my position in the different categories. I'm the only one that really, from the roll your own category, had followers in pipe tobacco even before I changed. I'm the only roll your own company that legitimately made the effort to change to pipe tobacco. And it went to all the pipe shows every year and cultivated great friends, you know, like David and some of these other fellas. I mean, we're friends because we go to these things, it's a community and we love the pipe, you know, but the margins are huge, man. And I couldn't really do it because what I still had going for roll your own, I would collapse, but it was just a mindset for me. It's like, oh man, I can't charge that much. That doesn't seem right. You know, and if I'd done it until they go and pipe tobacco, and plus I gotta admit, most of our things aren't as heavily processed. My whole gig where we stood out was I made great blends because I used the best leaf. I didn't want to put like the Perique or some of these Orientals. I want to develop a blend that brought that flavor profile forward. If I put chemicals on it, man, I obscure whatever the tobacco is. Most of these guys, they don't know it, but they're getting the same blend. It's just got different flavorings on it. I mean, there's no skill in that. The skill is developing a blend that's well balanced and it's got the varietal flavor of the leaf.
And a couple of the good things you do, Mark, is the fact that you don't put chemicals, you don't put too much topping and casing, and you don't include 10 grams of water on those. That's what I
another
love
big
about being
difference.
natural.
Right. Yeah, because you roll your own, you don't have the high moisture. You know, so you're not getting it exactly. You're not getting that high moisture. Yeah.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I smoked all different kinds of Perique, real St. James Perique and Acadian, and there is big difference. Well, Perique leaf, it's basically a variety of barley grown in St. James Parish, which has unique soil, which contributes to unique flavor, also unique microclimate. So if you grow same seed, let's say in Kentucky and Tennessee, you get different results. And what I noticed, St. James Perique grown in St. James Parish, it has that unique kind of spice and fruitiness, something like plum and fig, which you cannot get from Acadian, basically barley grown in Kentucky or Tennessee and processed as Perique.
You know what? I'll challenge you on that. And I'll tell you why. They both vary so significantly from year to year, it would blow your mind. I mean,
Yeah,
I have
true.
years
It's true.
where the St. James has no varietal character at all. And I only use it in a blend because I don't feel like I can call it Acadian Perique without some St. James in it. But I would not be able to sell it straight. Okay, and some it's the other way. Let me tell you what I did, you know, when I was talking about the evolution over the 12, 18 months. Because this came up. Because I don't know if you remember, there was that one guy that came out for a while, and I tried to help him get started. God, I can't think of his name right now. He was at the trade shows for a little while selling the little jars. And it came up. Oh, you're selling faux Perique. This guy, I forget what his name was. He lasted for about a year. Oh, I'm the only one selling real Perique. I'm like, you know what you're talking about, man. You got one farm. I got 9 farmers down there. You're saying that this is faux Perique. This is the only thing people smoke for 100 years. So what I did, because Greg Pease is really big on this, and he was suspicious about what was going on. I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do another evaluation where I do it every few months, and I'll send you 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. And I won't label them, but I mean, I won't tell you what they are, but I'll have them labeled A and B. So you tell me what you think. So this happened to be a good year for both, actually, which is rare. Okay. So I sent him at 3 months. You all know Greg, right? Greg is crazy on flavoring, and I mean, he's worse than me, man. I mean, I know he was driving the folks at CD crazy because, you know, instead of saying do it at, you know, 100 degrees, it's 103.7 degrees or something like that. So he's really, you know, if you get it past Greg, you're pretty good. So sent him some at 3 months, and it was the same thing. Like I said, yeah, they're different. Neither of them are really that good. And I'm like, yeah, the one's St. James, you can tell a little bit because it's got a little bit more of the sweet note early on. He said, yeah, but the color's way off. 6 months, the St. James got ahead. It didn't have the color, but it got the flavor. He goes, oh yeah, man, I can tell now it's St. James. So 9 months, it was getting close. Okay. Well, at 12 months, I sent him 2 bags, but they were both air cured. I didn't send him any St. James at all. Okay. And I want to see what he would think, because it was one of those years where the air cured was just perfect. You know what I mean? That's the thing that sustained these guys since 1950. And he calls me up and he said, yeah, you're trying to trick me on that. Those are both really good. They're both straight St. James. And I said, no, you're right. I'm trying to trick you. They're both the air carried. And he goes, well, that's the best Perique I've ever smelled. And I said, well, keep in mind for one thing too, you're getting it from me as a manufacturer. It's raw whole leaf. When the manufacturers get it, they're going to be cutting it. They're going to be add casings and flavorings, whatever, to stabilize it for their blend. It's not going to smell just like this anyway. But I fooled Greg. It varies from year to year, though. But to say right off the bat every year that St. James is better than Acadian isn't correct. It just really varies from year to
Okay,
year.
I was going to ask you exactly that. Who are the main manufacturers that you provide to? And also, and you can answer if you want or not, how do you make the difference between either the Belmont, the Battery, or the Grand Point, or what's the difference?
Well, that's a two-part. Let me start with the manufacturers because I don't sell to very many manufacturers anymore. You know, Mike McNeil's gone with McClellan. I guess the main two domestic ones I sell to now, well, the only two really that are left, Sutliff and Cornell and Deal, right? I've got a big customer in Germany, so he probably supplies all the European guys. They get about 20 barrels a year. And then other than that, you know, I've got the cigarette guys. And a couple of years ago, I got a contract with JTI, and they make I don't know how long that'll last. They make a Perique cigarette in Asia, but not many customers left. That's why, if you think about why did P&T magazine die? There are no manufacturers left to advertise. We're all gone. You know, and even when I started, man, the consolidations and everything else. I mean, think about it. I mean, Lane is now, you know, it was bought by Scandinavian Tobacco Group. They don't make anything domestically. We're lucky Sutliff makes stuff domestically because they're owned by Mac Baren. You know it, right? So then after that, what was the second part of your question? Now I forget. See, that's why I couldn't get interrupted earlier.
The difference how you blend like Belmont.
Oh yeah, how to differentiate the different regions. Okay. Man, there was only 1 year where they were good from all the farmers, believe it or not. And I bought it in 2005. And in that 1 year, literally, I was like, they're all good this year. I'm going to do, just for kicks, a regional breakout. Okay. Because originally, and there's a lot of mythology around Perique. There was a book written, I found it, I think it was around 1824. And it was quoted over and over erroneously. No, I take that back. It was later than that. But there was the golden triangle where all the Perique was ground. Okay. And that was, if you imagine the river coming down like this, okay. And you've got Grand Point, here's the river, Grand Point out here. Okay, and New Orleans is down here. You've got Grand Point here. You've got Paulina here, and you've got Belmont here. Okay, those are the three sides. And you would think really that the triangle would come out like a wedge with the point at the river, as if the water was spreading out. But actually, the base is by the river. Okay. The reason I say that was mythology is I visited a plantation in Ascension Parish, which is farther toward Baton Rouge. Okay. And I had a map. The guy had a map from the Civil War era. And they had a huge canal that cut over to the river back then before they had the levee. And it was called the Perique Canal. And on that plantation, they had a factory where they made Perique, or whatever you want to call it, processing facility. So it wasn't always just St. James Parish. Not only that, interestingly, and this is a long story to get to why I came up with those. When I first bought it, before I bought the factory and started living in the house. What's that? Go ahead. I didn't hear you. Is there a question there? I missed that.
Moto, did you have a question?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. So, Mark, go
Okay.
ahead.
So anyway, when I first got there, when I bought it, I hadn't restored anything on the property. It was in ruins, man. It was in ruins. No wonder they couldn't make any Perique there. It was falling apart. The house was in ruins. So I'd stay at a hotel. Well, I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning because all the farmers, when I was staying in Gonzales on the other side, they would have breakfast at a place called Sandwich World in near Grand Point. So I'd get up at 4 so I could meet them at 5. And that's how I got in with the farmers. Okay, is I'd meet with them. They'd be in the field by daybreak. And then I'd meet with the business people and then the bankers and politicians and everything. And I did that for a number of years. And that's how I got to figure out where it was grown and what was going on historically. And come to find out, one of the guys, and a lot of them old, it was when I first got in there, man, it was just old guys. They were all dying out. They weren't even by growing tobacco at any young age. And that's when one of the guys said, oh yeah, man, I used to work at Mr. Roussel's when I was a young kid, right after World War II, and we were blending then. And we had to because, you know, we had some bad years and everybody out at war. And then we started doing it when, you know, we had bad years. Now, the other thing is, one of the other guys said, yeah, also during that era, we grew on the other side of the river because the soil's the same. It's not, you know, it's not just, and it's St. James. It's still St. James, but it's on the other side of the river. And that was South Batchery. Okay. And I had a guy who was willing to try it. He goes, yeah, they used to grow out here. I'll try it. He had one good year, and after that, he grew crap. And I was like, yeah, can't buy your stuff anymore, man. You haven't figured it out. So what that gave me that 1 year was South Batchery, which was Mr. Falco and his family. And then I had Paulina, which was Dudley. I had Belmont, which was the Gravois. And then moving away from the river, I had Myco, Roussel, and Gino and Grant Martin in Grand Point. And that's interesting. They're over in Grand Point. When you go in, there's Gino and Grant's field, and Myco's is off to the right. When you go around that curve back there, that's when you get back farther and you see the people that, some of the neighbors that were growing for Percy when he was alive. And they're struggling, man. I guess I say Percy, he died a number of years ago. Okay. And I used to like him because that guy worked hard. His sons weren't very productive. He had 3 boys and 2 girls still alive when I would go see him. And their stuff was really filthy, but good people. At least he was a good guy. But I went over one time to see him, and it was, you know, I don't remember the year the Super Bowl was won by New Orleans, but his son the week before had gotten up because they recorded it to play it that morning, and he dropped dead walking to the bathroom. Okay. Well, another brother had died right before. What was his name? Little Boo. They all had nicknames. So I'm over there, and he's just lost two sons, and he's old, and they're giving him meds, and he's falling apart. Because I worked in healthcare, I'm like, man, his age, you can't give him those meds. He's hallucinating. You got to get him stable. You know, and he's telling me he wants to die and all this other stuff. And I'm trying to figure out what to do to help the man. And he lived for a little while longer. Okay. But when he passed, the daughters are like, sell it, get out. And the boys are like, no, because we're doing Santa Fe. But it was left with 3 boys. Ray, who runs it. Fortunately for Ray, his sons picked it up because his other 2 brothers, Kenny, and I can't remember the other one. But anyway, the other 2 boys, one has a game arm and he can't do much in the field. And the other is a sweet guy, but he's schizophrenic and he talks to himself all the time and can't really function. So Percy's farm is stable, but it's because Ray's got his son and his neighbors are helping out. You know, so that's the other side, man. It's them and me. You know, so the pressure's on me. So, but when I bought the property, there was a little house and the front was in ruins. There were 2 little factory buildings. One was somewhat in ruins. One had a roof that was falling apart. you had, if you used every press, you had maybe 65 that didn't have a roof falling in on it or whatever. Well, I got in, restored both buildings, spent a lot of money, built a 20,000 square foot receiving station in the back. Okay. By repairing those old buildings, I brought it up from 65 to 122 presses. And with the new building I built in the back, I got 300. So I got 422 presses. Whether or not we'll ever sell that many, I doubt. But you know, when you're doing the pressure, you might have 300-400 pounds. By the time you blend to get 500, you might use 300 presses and get down to 250, 225 in full barrels. But yeah, when I bought it, man, it was in ruins. It was in total ruins. And the facility is stable. So even if I die, Parikh will survive. But it's because of the facility and because I'm paying the farmers enough now that there'll be enough to grow for the blend. Whether
Mark, I got some questions.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
YouTube group over here.
Like I told you at the beginning, I'm so passionate, I go on forever.
We live for these kinds of stories. Are you kidding? That's why we got up this morning to come and hear you tell stories. But I did promise the guys on YouTube that I would try to get all their questions asked and whatnot. So let me pop in with a couple. And then you brought show and tell for everybody. You brought some, you sent me some photos, and I thought maybe I'm going to see if I can make this happen using the software here. It might be a bust, but we'll give it a shot. But here's some of the questions first. What happened to it? Oh gosh. Well, first of all, here's a fan. Al says, best regards to the honorable guest, Mr. Mark. I hold high respects for his work and creativity. Please keep providing us with your beautiful blends. So that's coming right from the YouTube guys. And Al also has, Al Janabi has a question. He says, how long can the tobacco be stored in the factory sealed 16-ounce bags, or do they need to go to mason jars immediately?
You know, I've had some folks question about that because I know a lot of the guys preserve stuff in mason jars. With the tobacco we ship, it's not so moist that it's as big of an issue. As long as you keep it, you know, out of the sun, because if it sweats, you get some moisture accumulation on the side, then you get some mold. And you want it somewhat dark. You can keep it in the bag. I would say leave it up to yourself and your good judgment. Once you open it, you're going to have to deal with it. The thing about tobacco, when you got good tobacco, even if it gets dry, because I've heard people say, I left the bag open, it got dry, it's ruined. It's like, no, it's not necessarily ruined, man. You just need to rehydrate it. You know, there's some things that really can go bad with a lot of age, like a Latakia, and some if they're left open, particularly in the sun. But if it's sealed good, it should, protect most of that freshness. Even if it gets a little dry, you can rehydrate, and that will bring, those aromatics back to the forefront.
Does tobacco mellow out as it ages?
Yeah, it does. In fact, Virginia, not only does it get more mellow, but it gets darker. But tobacco will mellow, and one of the reasons for that, this is why, for those of you that smoke cigars, for a while there, the cigars, man, at least to my palate, they were nasty because they had so much friggin' ammonia in them. And you get that in tobacco anyway, okay? And in the early days, you would age tobacco a minimum of 3 years. Tobacco goes through 2 natural sweats a year, and it's got to go through a minimum of 6 sweats, so a minimum 3 years to get some of those unpleasant things out and for it to neutralize. Some of the ammonias to go out, some of the harshness, some of the sugars to stabilize. And what happened with a lot of the cigar guys, they were trying to cater to a younger crowd, and they were using immature tobacco and still had some ammonia in it. And the reason being, the ammonia from the tobacco would drive the nicotine into your blood faster, and you get a buzz off of it. So that's a deal. That's a deal with that. But the dry tobacco isn't as big an issue as you would think.
Same. Al also has another question. He says, any new blends coming? He says, I missed the collaboration with Suge and with Russ Alette.
I know.
Are those blends were phenomenal? Are they coming back?
It's illegal to come out with any new blends. It's illegal for anybody to come out with a new blend. See, the way the FDA thing was, let me explain that a little bit. Okay. The drop dead date was April 15th, 2007 on the grandfather status. Okay. If we came out with a product, I'm trying to remember the dates. I think it was the September, I might have the numbers wrong. It's something like the September 15th, I think it was 2016. If it came out in that interval, you could continue to sell it until the deadline, which was this past September 15th, in which case it's illegal to sell. Okay. No new blends can be produced
I meant to say this
ever
Perique
in the
mellow
United
out as it
States.
ages.
So no blends can ever be released. And they allowed during that interim period for us to continue to sell it. Now, to keep it on the market after this past September, the companies had to do one of two things: a substantial equivalence report, which says this was identical to what was on the market in 07. Those are the ones that cost 100, 200,000 per SKU. That's what they were forecasting. Now, if it was totally different than something 07, but if it was a new product released during that period, you had to do what was called a pre-market tobacco application, a PMTA. The FDA was saying 2 million per SKU. Obviously, it didn't work out like that because my guy did 29 for 2 million. Okay. But basically, what they said was after that date, September 15th, if it wasn't on the market in 07, or if you haven't submitted an SE or a PMTA, it's got to be removed from the market and you cannot release anything new, period. It's illegal. Okay. There've been a couple new products released at expense of millions of dollars. The first one to be released
I
was
just want to
the,
say hi, David. This
was
is
the
little Pat
Snoo.
Morgan.
What's that? And the only reason they got it approved was they had like 40 years of history and 150,000 pages. And can you imagine the millions of dollars? So facing that, I'm like, what am I going to do? I gotta either shut down. I had 600 SKUs I had to pull off. This guy spent the money to keep the pipe tobaccos on, but the new ones I did, like London Dock, all the, English Hoopla, they weren't on the market in 07. It was illegal for me to sell them after the deadline. Illegal manufacturing, illegal to sell. All my hard work in developing cool stuff. All my, interesting blends with that Virginia Perique that I made, the Raccoon series, all illegal. I can't make any of them anymore. I hope that answers.
I'm gonna.
So no new blends.
So no new blends
From anybody.
We're just gonna have to show up at the pipe show and just like get it on the down low. You just small batch it for us.
Well, what happens is that the companies, they're rebranding, so you'll see a new name, but it's an old blend.
Gotcha.
It's rebranding.
I'm going to see if I can arrange for that series of photos that you sent me, the slideshow. And while I'm doing that, maybe let me open it up again to questions. The guys in the group here, just throw your mics on and just ask Mark a question.
Okay,
Mark,
so
can
when
I
it comes
ask a
to
question.
Yeah, David, go ahead.
All right. Okay, you're talking about, from what I understand, we're talking about anything that's produced after what is it, September 15th, 2015, something like that.
2015 or 16, something like that. Yes, sir. I think it's 2016.
Okay. What about imports? If something gets, say, for example, a Danish tobacco or a Cameroon tobacco or something along that line, that gets imported, is that going to be under the same law?
Unless it was on the market on that one day in 07, it's illegal. I can't bring any of my Perique cigars in because they weren't on the market on 07. It's illegal for me to import them now.
I thought we lived in America.
Well, I know it's hard to believe this is America today.
The Kazami tobacco that Aaron sent me, that was illegal. He said it was tea in the customs form. I guess the Japanese have a whole monopoly on it. My question was, when it comes to Perique, Acadian Perique, St. James Perique, how many different, are there different genres of Perique? Or, I mean, I know it's St. James Parish.
I'm not going to be able to do the different regions anymore.
Mm-hmm.
For one thing, South Atchery couldn't produce consistently. And the others can't do it consistently. It's very rare they're good every year. It just varies. It's bizarre. And not only that, it's strange. If I have 10 barrels from one farmer, they're not even all the same smelling. If you don't have the blending for consistency, sometimes you're really in trouble.
So I know, like the Acadian Perique, Rinpoche AP. I asked Jeremy Reeves because when they came out with these two, the 20th anniversary blend for C&D came out for SPC. It said that they had 18-year-old Perique.
I sold them one of those too.
And I was going to ask.
When I bought that factory, I had 6 barrels that were left in there. That was the legacy inventory when I bought the factory. That was going to be the world supply in perpetuity. When I bought it, that was it. Okay. So the bank made me do a, I forget what you call it, where you go and making sure everything's good when you buy it. So they made me open those barrels, and I asked Mr. Boucher, yeah, why don't you sell these barrels? They're no good. And he goes, no, those are the best 2 barrels each year because they're not all the same. So I'm like, so those are going to be good, huh? So I had 2 from 01, 202, 203. So I held on to them. All right. And created the Decade series. All right. And that's where I released them very carefully, but only to friends. Right. Because they were very special. That's why Mike got some, Jeremy got some, and I even sold some to Sutliff. But there's no way I was going to sell them to regular folks because the longer it's in that barrel, man, it evolves. The other thing that's really interesting, once you get into like 12 months, you get even more complex notes. You get like olive notes and pine nut notes. I mean, if you're getting a good year, the complex flavor, that little peppery, spicy, balanced with the sweet. But you're going to get a perfect barrel 1 out of 5 years, really.
Mark, I have a question for you. I'm fairly new to pipe smoking, but I find your program excellent, very interesting. My question is, how am I going to know if I want to use a Perique for blending? If I want to get a St. James Parish Perique, how am I going to know?
Well, if you're going to get it on the market, you're not going to get straight St. James because it's going to be rare that's going to be good enough to sell straight, honestly. And, it's so inconsistent down there with bad years that it's hard for me to have a barrel that I can do straight St. James. Now, occasionally I will, and it will go to, Jeremy at C&D, or maybe the guys at Sutliff. Those would be the only ones I give them to now. But usually on a yearly basis, the Acadian is better. Believe it or not, and that's the only thing people were getting. They just didn't realize it. Since about 1950, almost everything was the blend.
Well, if you go online and just look at it, I mean, it'll say Louisiana Perique or, different kinds of Perique, but how does the person know, or you don't?
Well, not only does it have to have some St. James in it, to me, it's got to be processed at one of those 2 factories. Well, Louisiana Perique, it's coming out of Louisiana. It's not going to be straight St. James, very rarely. You can't get it. And I know in the past, sometimes people would go down there, and this used to terrify me when they first started regulating. I went down and visited a farmer, and he sold me some whole leaf Perique. And I'm like, you posted it on the internet, you're going to get that guy in jail because he's not legal to sell it and hadn't been taxed, and oh my God. But really the folks that get straight St. James now, if they get any, if I have a good barrel, I'll pull some to the side and I'll bring some up and give it to friends. But it's whole leaf.
So I've got a couple of
yeah.
ounces of Perique that I bought from McClellan's, I think about 2016, 2017. Did that come from you?
Yeah, since 1980, everything came from Pochet. Now, the other thing is, the reason why there's still some of those different ones floating out, because when I had that good year, I made the blender's bench, you know, where I had the separate leaf for hobbyists like you all, you know, and like Fred that wants that straight St. James, you know, because when I had a good year, man, I did straight St. James. I did them in the different varieties, and they are different. Okay, it depends, and it's different from year to year. But that 1 year, man, they were so distinctly different that it was worth playing with. I can't regularly do that.
Now, Mark, does that indicate that the regulations on sale of tobacco only apply to the assumption that it's going to be smoked, like as a product, and not cover people who are just going to, you know, do whatever they're going to do with it, make tea out of it or make their own blends or whatever? Does it affect the sale of whole leaf tobacco to hobbyists?
Yeah, because as a processor, when the taxes went up on cigarettes, I had to get a license from my factory down there. And I'm a manufacturer of processed tobacco.
Gotcha.
I'm only legally allowed to sell it to a manufacturer of finished products or to another manufacturer of processed tobacco.
I tried
Because
smoking Virginia out of briar. Didn't like it. Somebody suggested I try it out of a cub.
what was it?
Try
What
that.
tobacco?
Try your question again and maybe a little bit louder.
I didn't quite get that question.
Yeah, I kind of missed it too.
He said he was told to smoke it out of a cob.
I smoke a cob occasionally, especially when I'm blending. I like using a corn cob. Oh, I see you got a nice clay pipe there.
Yeah, is there?
Those are good too when you're blending. A corn cob or a clay pipe or even a meerschaum, you know?
Well, that's what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
I really like Bayou Morning because I guess it has a lot of Perique in it. So today I thought I'd try it in a clay, a cob, a briar, and a meerschaum. So my question was, is there a particular type of pipe that the Perique comes out better from?
You know, I haven't been asked that before. I always, you know, smoke mine in a briar. I think it depends on the pipe. Some pipes just are fantastic. I remember we had a program one time at Chicago back in the old days when we used to be able to do the ice cream social. And we had a speaker, I can't think of his name right now. He's real famous, God. And he talked about that. Sometimes you just have a magic pipe, you know, that things taste great in. And one blend, it just will taste sour in a particular pipe, but it does a home run in that one particular pipe. I don't know if it's, I mean, there's certain categories, obviously, that are good for certain things, you know, like the clay or the corn cob, but the individual pipe can vary within that category, I believe. But I don't really have a favorite. Now I know, like this one here, that's the only one. I have a couple that I smoke Latakia and I don't smoke, you know, regular blend after a Latakia pipe, in a Latakia pipe. But
Mark, I have one question from the YouTube group, and then let's try these pictures because I'd love to get the backstory on them. Jeff says, what do you think about the Samuel Gawith St. James Flake?
you know, I've had a lot of stuff with Gawith Hogarth because I was a good friend with Rob and I visited their facility. I don't remember smoking the Samuel Gawith one because I know they got folded in too because they were having issues for a long time with shipping. I can't really, honestly, I don't want to fake it. I can't remember. I don't know if I've had that one or not.
Gotcha. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to try something here. I've got the, what I don't know is I'm going to try to spotlight the slideshow. But I don't know that,
and I'll describe it as you go.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if you talking will overpower it. So let me give it a try here. Let's see what happens. All right. So
that's a sign out front of the old building.
All right. And everybody can see this?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. All right. Now let me go ahead and go to the next one here.
Okay, there you can see the screw jacks. And what we do is when we take the tobacco out, we put them on those horses and we let the tobacco breathe out overnight before we put it back in. And when you bring it out, it's pretty black. It lightens from the air, and then it gets real dark again when you put it under the pressure. And what we're doing there, that's one of the tricks I tried to teach Percy. You gotta let it breathe out overnight when you turn it. It helps the tobacco and helps the ammonia dissipate and other things. And that's in the new building. You can see how we've got those presses lined up, and we put the weights on the barrel. You can see 104. And, you know, it's a pain because we weigh, you know, when we're doing that final third turn, that's when we're doing the blending if it's straight St. James, and you weigh each bit as you go in because you can't put 500 pounds at one time. It's twice as high as the barrel. And so you weigh it in increments. And so you put 500 pounds in, but the problem is when you're pressing it, you're still pulling a little liquid out, and there might be some issues. So after we got it, we're ready to cap. Believe it or not, we got to move the daggone scale over and double check the weight because I don't want to short my customers. But anyway, that's what's going on there.
You only use bourbon casks?
Used bourbon casks, absolutely. And this is where, see, on the front one, that's one of those railroad jacks. And that's one of the gentlemen, he's using the screw jack and he's tightening that up. And there's one of the fellows. Now this one, there's no string on the bundle, so that's the third turn. He's filling that barrel and getting ready to get it ready to sell. That's the same gentleman, that's Shine. His nickname is Shine for moonshine. I guess when he was younger, he used to drink moonshine. And that's Maurice. Let's see, is there something on the bottom there? I think that's probably where he's working the tobacco.
I had these all in this great order, and then when I put it into the slideshow, they all got jumbled up. So
it's all right.
There's another.
Here's one where he's loading the barrel. You see, he's loading it and he's using that railroad jack. See how far down it is? So that still has a string on. He's packing it down so it can get into the fermentation.
I have a question. How many times do you use the same barrel?
We only use it once because we sell it in that barrel to the manufacturer. So when they buy a barrel, it's net 500 pounds, and the barrel can range from 99 pounds to 115. So the gross weight's somewhere around 600 pounds. And a manufacturer buys 500 pounds at a time.
Where do you see the bubbles coming from when the fermentation starts?
Do we have any pictures of that? I'm not sure. If you look,
yeah.
Okay, if you look, like even in this picture, behind his right elbow, you see where there's that orange screw jack? It's got two moons, which are boards that were cut to fit into that barrel, okay? And as you press it down, you know, the barrel is more narrow at the top. So as you press it down, there's roughly a 1-inch ring, you know, around the outside. And you'll see the bubbles foaming up from there. Usually what I try and do after they start, take the pressure off and move those moons back to the edge. And then that way the opening is in the center and I can control the fermentation better with that. But it's actually, you'll see it, you know, on the edge of that barrel around those moons. You see there's some boards. I don't know if you can see it on there, but they're boards between the tobacco. They're the moons, and then you put boards and then the jack.
Is the pressure from the jacks measured?
We don't measure it. You basically put as much as those men can get on it. During the first few months, you got to watch out because you got to back some off.
My question is for
because the
Steve.
fermentation will make that barrel
Are you able to
explode.
run a pipe cleaner through a clay pipe?
What was that?
I don't know where that's coming from.
All right, well, keep going with the pictures.
Yeah.
Here's Maurice. He's working it. See, when you get it out of that barrel, it is a brick, man. It doesn't even look like tobacco. It's got that string in the middle, and you literally have to work it. You know, sometimes you beat it on the edge of the barrel and loosen it up. So it's that leaf again. You want that aeration in there. That's what's so critical. That looks like a chunk coming out. You can see it's like a brick. That's when you pull it out. You use a hook. You put a hook down on the side, and I usually lever it up and I hit it on 4 corners, and then I get my hands in there and then I peel it out, and then it's, you know, it's this big chunk, and then you break it into the bundles and then you work it. Now here's a gal who's working the tobacco. That's the bundle, and she's breaking it up to loosen the leaves.
This is
And
after
it's so
it's come out of the
labor
barrel.
intensive. It's insane. What's that?
This is after it's been in the barrel for a year.
No, this one's probably, she's working it. That's probably within the first 6 months. That looks like maybe the first or second turn.
And then it goes back in the barrel again.
It goes back in the barrel. You reverse the order when you take it out. You put it back under pressure. During that first and second turn, you can get some secondary fermentation reactivated, but generally, shortly after that second turn, it stops.
Gotcha.
All right, now here's where they're tying it. This gal here, you can see the string in the middle, and that's where she stripped the leaves and she's tying them into bundles. So that's the raw leaf before it's gone into the barrel. And there's another gal tying it.
I'm curious how the name Rinpoche came about.
Well, you know, poche, I like that. And when I was in college, I took a Buddhist thought class, and we had a teacher. He only spoke Tibetan, and he came out in these gold robes and purple robes. And the teacher said that his title was the Precious. And I looked him up a couple years ago. I first thought he was the Dalai Lama, because I swear to God, when I saw a picture of the Dalai Lama, it's like, that was my teacher. Well, come to find out, he's not the Dalai Lama, but he's the guy next to him who supposedly is like the 40th incarnation of some famous deity guy. And his name was Rinpoche, but it was spelled differently, S-H-E-Y or something.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to Southernize it with the bow, and I'm going to make it Rinpoche.
Okay.
You know, and it came Southern and brought it together.
Because that's what they called the Dalai Lama. When the Dalai Lama was a little kid, they called him Rinpoche.
Okay, well, the picture that I saw, they didn't call him the Dalai Lama. He's some precious thing.
Right.
Where he's some reincarnation, but he wasn't the Dalai Lama, but he was some, it was a bizarre thing for a kid in college. But that's where I got the name.
Interesting.
Isn't that something?
Mark, when did they devein the tobacco?
Well, when the tobacco is brought in, it's dry, okay, because it's been cured, okay, in the barn. And let me mention the curing too, because you'll all find that interesting. There's several ways you can cure the tobacco. Okay, you can flue cure it, right, where they have the indirect heat. You have air cured, you know, like burley or air cured, and with that, see, with flue cured, you remove the leaves, right? Whereas with burley and air cured, and even Perique, you cut the base of the stalk and you hang it in the barn, and it cures out until you get all the green out, and that's when you break the leaves. Okay, so you get a pile of leaves. Now in St. James, once it's cured out in the barn, they break the leaves. They bring it to me to stem. Now the stuff it didn't had years of curing, you know, to dissipate stuff. Whereas the stuff that I'm buying for the blend, it's cured out longer. Okay, that's another thing that really helps that. So they bring the raw leaf in, and it's dry. Okay, and the tobacco term is bringing tobacco to order, and basically you hydrate it enough so that you can remove the stem without crumbling the leaf. Okay, and it's called bringing it to order. And what we do is you just hydrate it with water. Okay, It's got to sit for a while so that the water goes into the leaf. Otherwise, it's just sitting on the leaf and the processing isn't going to work right. Okay. It absorbs in, it builds the cells back up, and then they can handle it. And we do what's called frog stemming. Imagine you've got this leaf shaped like this. You come from the top, you go about 4 inches down, and you pull the stem and bring it out. So you got what looks like the head of a frog and then these 2 legs. So that's what we do. And they sit around, do that. They create a pile, and somebody then ties it, and then it's weighed so we can compensate the strippers based on the weight they stripped. And then it goes to a bunch of other fellows that put them in a particular way in the barrel and start the pressure.
I got a question from the group over there on YouTube. Just sort of connected, but a little bit off of the pictures. One of the guys says, I didn't know this, but I was reading an article that said that McBaron makes 70% of the world's pipe tobacco. And he says, I'm probably their biggest fan. Do you have an opinion about McBaron and any dealings with them? Do you sell them Perique or?
I do. And I think currently it's indirectly through my German guy. I know Per Jepsen personally. He's really good. Okay. In the early days, when McBaron wasn't so much catering to the American market, I found it burned kind of hot. But then, let's say maybe 10 years ago, I think they started catering more to the US market, and they came out with stuff like this HH series, and it wasn't so goopy and hot. I like this. And I know they made one, you're asking me before about the blends. They made one that's got a green label. It's called Acadian blend, and that's as good as any Perique blend I've ever smoked, I think. It's really awesome. And he got a great barrel. I mean, that's the key. And I've sold Per some of the, I mean, originally I had 6. I'd have to look them up, but I know he got some of the older ones too. You know, the better companies, you know, and you deal with somebody direct, like Per with Mike McNeil or Jeremy, they're really picky. And if I'm on an occasion where I'll say, well, you know, I've got some barrels ready for you, and they're going to be this price. But man, I got some that were from a couple of years ago that I still have, and I can charge you, you know, a couple of dollars more, but they're more involved and they're really sharp. And you tell one of those guys, it's like, yeah, they don't even ask you the cost. Just send it to me. That's how Mike was too. Because the first barrel I ever sold of that the Decade series was Mike McNeil. And I was like, Mike, there were 2 from 01. I got one from my company and you got one. You could price that at an absurd, obscene rate, or make a blend and say it's got this amazing, you know, Perique in it. And for those of you that know Mike, his attitude was, no, man, I just want him to wonder why mine's so much better. He wouldn't tell people that he had that barrel.
Awesome.
That's funny. That's Mike.
Well, I want to finish up some of these photos because
Yes,
we're
sir.
getting towards the end of our. Now, don't everybody freak out. Every time I say this every weekend, people are like, oh, I'm going to check my watch or whatever. Mark, your stories are gold. I don't want to, we're not going to chase anybody away, but I do try to keep everybody from getting in trouble with their families and spouses from being gone all afternoon. So let's go another 15, you know, maybe, and see if we can't squeeze a few more great stories out of Mark. But let me finish up these pictures here. Let me see if I can get this working. I'm so
Where we were.
I'm so excited that it worked, that the spotlight worked. All right. What are we looking at here?
That's that same one where the leaf's been tied up. It's getting ready to go into the barrel. And there's Walter. Walter's my oldest gentleman. He's working the tobacco. And it looks like the one in his hand is a bundle that hadn't been worked yet. See the bundles up there? They're more tight. Whereas the one that Michelle was doing, they were all loose looking. See, when they come out of the barrel, man, it's like a brick. You really got to work it. And that's Walter. That's another picture of the new building. The new building is divided into 3 parts. The front is where the presses are. The middle is where we do the stripping, and the back is the receiving station. All right, now here, the thing that's interesting here, you see the ones on the left, those have the plastic liner. And what we do when we do the 3rd and final turn, and we might go 4 and 5 turns if there's ammonia, which drives me insane because I lose like crazy. But when they're ready to go, we line it with the barrel, and you see how, this is what I was showing you before, where those boards are, they're the moons right underneath of that. And that's how we get the pressure in there. Same thing.
And then I think
That's the old building. That's the building that's about 100 years old.
And I think that,
Yeah, that's it.
that wraps it up there. Awesome. Well, fellas, what questions do you have for Mark? And just, again, just pop right in and ask your questions. And
I've got one last question.
Sure.
Now that we're at the end, I'll be the buzzkill here. Supply is always equal to demand. When I asked Brian Levine about this, he asked everybody to plug their ears because nobody wanted to hear it. What do you see happening in the market relative to demand for your product? Is it staying the same? Is it fluctuating? Is it going down? Is it?
Well, we had a catastrophic drop in demand, obviously, from when we eliminated roll your own, right? I would say demand hopefully will still be consistent from our main ones that are popular. Three sales is the most popular, I think, right now. That's the real fine cut Virginia, kind of like the Japanese. But honestly, I think demand on some of them is going to go through a lot of growth because of the distribution of the new company. But since they're a bigger company, demand won't be enough to keep some of the blends on the market. Now, fortunately, like AP and SJ and even some of the AB, which are really exceptional, I don't know if he's going to be able to sustain those because the volumes don't really justify it at his level. And some of the others, like aside from that, some of them I can't get the leaf. Like that Ramback Balkan. Oh my God, the rare leaf I used to put in that. You just can't get it. I mean, you can get it if you're going to get container loads of tobacco, and then you got 30 years of inventory. You know, that's where we're hurting, and that's what backed Mikey out. And you can't get this stuff unless, I mean, I can get anything, but the volume is just a deal kill.
Mark, it's a great treat to have you with us as our guest. Thank you so much. I learned a lot from you and really enjoyed listening to your stories. Thank you. And thank you for saving Perique for all of us.
I appreciate that. I'm glad to. Glad to.
David Ruiz would be a wreck wandering by the side of the road if he didn't.
Yeah, I wanted to say the same for amazing stories he always has about everything. He knows everybody, but mostly, as I always call him, the Perique rescuer. For people like Dimitri and me that we love Perique, yeah, we don't know what we will do without him. So thank you very much for saving the Perique to all of us.
Thank you, David. And, you know, people like David who have appreciated what I've done in the past, at this point in my life, that makes the reward there, you know, because when you're losing everything, it's a tough pill to swallow, you know. Oh, can I finish with the origin of the word Perique?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Where did that word come from? If you have some other questions that are real urgent, I got to answer because this is kind of funny.
All right. So he's going to save this story for a second here. So if you've got a question, this is the best time to ask it. Just hop on.
It was the nickname, right?
So David, hold on to that because we're going to get him to tell. But I want to, Jonas got a question. Let's go ahead, brother.
So I'm new to Virginia and Perique in general, both of them. And I was wondering, I'm here sitting on my Escudo Navy Deluxe, and I'm wondering if you had an opinion on how many years a tobacco like this should cellar to give that Perique a time to really marry with the other tobaccos and give it a dynamic balance between the flavors? I mean, is there a specific number of years where it starts to really make a big difference?
Now that's an interesting question because it does vary by blend. But when you first do the blend, like when I first did my first AP Rinpoche, 20% Perique, 80% super high grade Virginia. When you first blend it, man, it's like salt and pepper, night and day. You know, the bright yellow versus the dark. But as time passes, the flavors marry, right? The Virginia darkens with age, and the Perique can lose some of its color with age too, okay? So it definitely evolves in time. And I don't know if there's a peak for when they marry, but once they marry, man, it's good for a while. And the reason that's interesting, you raise that question, is back in that era, we do a big run. I mean, you can't do it feasibly now because of the demand. But, you know, a run, you know, for 20,000 pounds or whatever might last a while. So you're getting the marrying in and the flavor the color profile changing at the end when you get a new one in. So I'd have somebody used to getting it early on, get one near the end. And I swear to God, I had a guy call me up. Oh man, there's no Perique in there. I can't see it. All looks pretty much the same color. And I'm like, I took the tobacco out of the barrel. I put it on the floor. I put it on the conveyor. I saw it go through the cutter. I was there as we blended it. It's got 20% Perique. It's just that you were blessed before to have it when it's fully ready. When we first blend and cut, it's still kind of competing with itself, and it's not really, for the roll your own guys, that was fine. But for the pipe guys, you get more mellow. The tobacco will mellow with the age, and you get that marrying, which really, that gives you that subtlety and you get that balance that you want. But in terms of, I can't really say which tobaccos will blend over a certain amount of time off the top of my head. I had to experiment.
Anybody recommend any blends for somebody that's on a limited income?
You need some tobacco on a limited income? Is that what your question? Was that the question, David?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Well, if somebody's really hurting and they don't have tobacco, they can email me and I'll take care of them. Let me just put it like that. They don't have to worry about it.
Dude, you're the
My
man.
question was if somebody can recommend some tobacco blends on a limited income.
Recommend some tobacco blends on a limited income.
Well, for a limited income for mine, if you like a Virginia Perique, the lower price one will be like an AP or an SJ, or even the AB, which has the Acadian Black in it. But most of the inexpensive pipe tobaccos, they're either roll your own off the shelf or there's some groupie nasty crap.
Mostly.
You got to watch out.
What are all these initials that you've been talking about? Where I picked that up?
Which initials? Like, well, SJ is AB is Acadian Black. AP, I call Acadian Perique.
Yeah.
It used to be called Green River. The reason we did that is I had to change the Rinpoche, AB, Rinpoche, AP, and when I tried to register them in the correct order, they wanted me to register 3 names separately. And I'm like, no, they're 3 veins within that blend. So that's why. But the SJ is the St. James. AB is the Acadian Black, which is that dark fired, which I sent down to Parikh to process in the Perique process. The original ones that I sent, Mike McNeil got into. He was the only one that could really make that work. And he did Cajun Black series. And then I developed the Acadian Black.
I'm in Arizona. Where can I get something along the line of a sample of what you distribute or what you grow in your area in St. James?
You mean just the straight Perique, or do you want blends, or what do you want?
Well, I want to get an idea what it tastes like. I want to get an idea what it's going to burn like.
Well, email me and I can send you some samples. And if I don't have them, I'll get something for you.
Mark, do you want me to put your email that you sent to me on the thread there, or you want them to go look it up? Or
just have people ask if they want to correspond with me and send it. Don't just broadcast it.
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
I get enough emails.
Yeah, I hear you. So David,
you never hear the end of it.
Yeah,
No, but I'd be happy. I'd be happy to just set you up on that.
Yeah,
because that's the thing. I mean, especially, you know, if it doesn't come in a small package, you get a big bundle of tobacco and you don't like it. What do? You're stuck.
Yeah.
There's a
small.
There's a really good question that came up on the YouTube channel over there.
Yeah.
Mark, it says, I'm just gonna read it. It says, you have pushed and worked so hard to keep the tradition of Perique going. Are you teaching a son, you know, daughters, guys, remember his company's name is Daughters and Ryan, not Ryan and Son, or a protege to take it up once you retire?
It is a good question. My daughters have nothing to do with tobacco. Okay. But the thing that helped me when I got the Parikh factory, Curtis Email was there when I bought it. He'd been working at the Parikh factory for 50 years. So I got under his wing and learned everything, you know, and got in there and did everything. Right. And now I've got a couple young men that are supervisors, and, you know, I've taught them. And plus I tell everybody in there what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. You know, although it's, you know, it's just like any company. You wonder if everybody's doing stuff the way you tell them when you leave. But I have passed that on. And not only that, because you can imagine when Percy broke away because of that one guy whose name I can't remember in 99, Percy had never processed tobacco. The only processor left was Mr. Pochet. Okay. Percy would bring it into him. Well, in 99, they had a falling out, and Mr. Pochet threw all his tobacco away. It was all rotten. Okay. And that's why he never bought any from Percy anymore. Okay. And shit, I forget what I was going to tell on that story. Oh, but anyway, so I learned from Kurt, and I learned all the tricks. And because of that, none of the farmers had ever processed. Okay. I've got a legal operation. You know, you asked before about, and I have to do this permit now down there, where I had to report everything I do and the volume, because when cigarettes went way up, the government realized we got to track what the processors do, because we don't know where it's coming from, and it can go to an illegal factory somewhere. Okay. So by law, if you process tobacco, you've got to have a license with the federal government. And I do my monthly, quarterly reports, all that junk. Well, Percy, when he was alive, set his up. So I can only bring in raw leaf. The farmers can't strip, they can't ferment anything, it's illegal. Well, Percy, because they don't have, let's say, administrative skills to do it, whatever, his farmers still process it illegally off-site and bring it to him. So they bring it to him after it's been in the barrel and, you know, turned a couple times. But that helps them. You know, thank God they don't enforce stuff, because when the government, they don't realize when they regulate what that imposes on the way things have been going for 200 years. You know what I mean? But I made the investment, made the receiving station. I'm legal. That's all I can say.
All right. Tell us the story of where Perique gets its name.
All right. There are two stories on this. Okay. And one is that the guy that discovered the Indians doing it was this guy, Pierre Chenet. Okay. And you know, when I did all the research, there were a couple dates attributed to when he discovered it from the Chickasaws and the Chickasaws, I think. One attributes to 1824. That's where I had that date, because there was a book written in the 1800s that referenced that date, and that's been repeated forever. And I think that's incorrect. Because I found another earlier reference that said he discovered it in 1780, and another reference that said he discovered it when he was a young man. He wasn't a young man in 1824. Okay. But Pierre Chenet was such a jerk, evidently. Okay. That they called him Prick. That Prick Chenet. Well, with the French, Prick became Perique. You know, that Perique, you know, that Prick. Okay. Well, the other thing was in the early days, they would sell Perique in this thing called a carotte. And Navy men in the 1800s would make this too, where the tobacco is made into something that looks like a salami, and you put a string in the middle and you work way out, and it's really tight. And it looks like a salami, and you slice off medallions, and you either chew it or you smoke it or you make a cigarette. So it looks like a phallus, right? So to me, you're selling a prick, right? A Perique, okay? So it could go either way. Interestingly, Mr. Poche, who I bought the factory from, his great-great-grandfather was Felix Poche, who has the plantation down from me. Felix married a woman, and I can't think of her name right now. Her great-great-grandfather was Pierre Chenet. When I bought the factory, because I did a lineage from Pierre Chenet, they didn't even know they were related to him until I showed them. I said, "You realize you're related to the guy who discovered this?" They had no clue. Okay. Now, the interesting thing with that is I've told that story a number of times, and I did it one time. I think it was in Chicago, and it took on a whole new meaning when Lee Von Erck started calling me Mr. Parikh. It's like, "Oh, thanks, Lee." "Yeah, Mr. Parikh over there." So I don't tell everybody the prick story. I paid for it when I told them.
We just lost our family show status. Well, that's an awesome story. That's a couple awesome stories.
Hopefully I didn't offend anybody.
Are you still going
It's
to
funny.
any of the shows? Like if they happen next year?
I'm going to go to every show I can.
That's
Still, because I still do it. And I still have, I'm going to keep some web pages going. I've got to do a lot of work to get them going, because I still have some inventory. It's just a mess. And you can imagine trying to get rid of 30 years of stuff in a couple months. I'm throwing away memories from 30 years ago. I've thrown away $1 million with inventory. It's just a struggle.
Well, fellas, you can, and ladies, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that Steph is out there as well. And last week we had Silver in the house and whatnot. You guys get the idea that we've only scratched the surface of Mark's stories that he's got to share with us. So Mark, would you come back again another time and speak to us again?
Sure.
We would love to have you back. So I'm going to do the thing that I do every week at this time and say the time bell rings. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So I just want to say thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who comes every week. You guys are the best part of my week for sure. Mark, you are an awesome guest speaker. I've been on the edge of my seat since the whole time here. So thank you very much. And like David said, let me echo, thank you for saving Perique. I'm totally diving in. It's a little bit under David's tutelage, actually.
Where
His
can I find some
tried papers and
Samuel and Hogarth and
No.
Gauth and Hogarth blends?
So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to. And unless there's another question, I'm going to head on. I'll
Yes,
be glad
sir.
if there are any other questions while I'm here.
If so, gentlemen, I know that Mark's offered to contact a few of you. I'm not going to put his email or his contact information out there, but you can contact me directly on go to the Facebook group page and message me, and I'll get you guys hooked up one way or the other.
Very good.
Meantime, have a great week, guys. Wash your hands, wear your mask, stay safe, don't be sick, and I'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks again, everybody. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.